Hello and welcome to the CRM Zen Show, where we talk about all things Zoho. This is episode 118, Mucho gusto, Zia, recorded on Friday, October 30th, 2020 from Zenatta Consulting. I'm Brett Martin.
And I'm Tyler Colt, and let's get right on into the show.
Well, first of all, some announcements here. So we are already set our next webinar. It's the November webinar, and it's going to be on Sales IQ, Overview and Best Practices, and that is November 24th, 2020 at 10 a.m. If you go to zenatta.com, you can register. It's on one of the sliding screens there at the very beginning. So I think it's the second or third screen in, and you go ahead and click that button and register, and we'll have the link in the newsletter as well. If you missed it, we also did our webinar on Zoho books, and that's up on YouTube, and we'll talk about that a little later on in the show, but went pretty well. And with that, Tyler, let's get into the news.
Yes, our first story is coming from the Zoho CRM team, and this is around a new field that they've added, a new field type here for an external ID. So this one's actually a really, really nice field to have. It's basically a field type that's designed to capture your unique identifier from a non-Zoho system. So if you're doing some type of integration, maybe you have a custom app that you want to tie into Zoho, you're going to have the Zoho record ID, but then that record is going to have its own ID, in the outside system that you're integrating with. And this is just a specific field that we can use to define that the value in it is an external ID. Nice thing around this is that, you're able to, by default, either show or hide this field to different types of users. I think 9 times out of 10, you really don't need to show this anywhere. It's only really going to be necessary via when you're accessing it via API or via custom function. So it doesn't really need to display on the page. They also have a setting for defining it as either for an organization or for a user. So this one kind of is a breakdown between, is this an ID specific to a record, or is this one of your user IDs from another system? So in the same way that you have a record owner for the CRM, you might have an owner of that record over in your, third-party application. And using this, you're able to kind of define, is this ID specific to the record or specific to a user who may own it? Overall, it's kind of one where, you could get this same type of functionality just by adding a standard field. But because it's defined here as an external ID, you're able to keep things a little bit cleaner on the page and define some of those specific usages for this external ID.
Yeah, I love this from the perspective of migration sometimes, especially a Salesforce migration. Oftentimes, they don't even give you actually it's true. So on some of the files you get when you do the migration, you've got absolutely nothing but a number, and that number is referring back to something. And to be able to map those in, which we usually do, we end up having to map them in. And then from there, we can go ahead and do assignments and run rules to, get everything properly assigned. But they're sitting there. This is just a slicker way of doing it. And then I think from an API, it's going to be pretty nice. So good stuff. And then Zia now supports Spanish. So what this means, everything seems to be Zia here. So Zia started off as, Zoho Artificial Intelligence. I don't know why it's Zoho Intelligence Artificial, I guess. But, it can be used for anything. You can, in the CRM, you can ask it questions and it gives you a response. Think of it as like a Siri, and with about that level of accuracy. And then over in other things, they came out with this recently. So they have a Grammarly replacement, for lack of a better thing. If you don't know what Grammarly is, it basically sits there and says, oh, you should have said this, and you should have used whom instead of who, and you don't need a comma here, you do need a comma here. It kind of points. It's very, very nice. Very great application. And so Zoho basically came up with their own version of it, and it's gotten really, really good. It's very good, as a matter of fact. And so now they're starting to support other languages. So they now support Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker and you're a writer, you will find that it works exceptionally well. So you now have this ability. So I think it's pretty cool. I imagine they're going to roll out a bunch of other languages down the road as they go through this. So mucho gusto, Zia. Mucho gusto.
Yeah, definitely a nice update there. I mean, the more the merrier with language support.
Yeah. And then last but not least, this is an Indeed thing, but Indeed is doing end of life for its resume search in Zoho Recruit. This is from Zoho. It's not really, they're just announcing it for all ATSs. So basically, any applicant tracking system, such as Zoho Recruit, where your resumes come in, Indeed is not going to allow that resume search anymore. However, they end this by saying, our other source boosters are still available to help you, protect hire. And the good news is that Indeed is brewing something new, and this promises to be an improved, enhanced resume search. So maybe they're just deprecating their old search and bringing back another one, but this is constantly changing with third-party vendors. There's a whole bunch going on with WhatsApp integration right now. WhatsApp has kind of stopped a bunch of things because of various issues they've been going through. So we see this all the time, but it's good to point out because sometimes these things just disappear and people are like, what happened? It used to work.
Yep. And this one, just to highlight, is not a change on Zoho's side, but is just pretty much uniform for Indeed across any of these ATS systems.
Yeah. And talk about a slow news week. That was everything new that I could find the entire week. So we do have a mobile app update, though. Zoho Projects for Android now supports geotagging. So I think this is kind of cool. They're kind of giving an example here of, maybe you're doing a deployment or something. You can take pictures of it. You've got a geotag, so you know where it was in the project. But I can see this for remote use being kind of a powerful tool.
Yeah, as well, especially if you have, if you're doing like implementations as well, like on-site implementations, maybe you snap a quick photo of a serial number, right? And geotag it that this serial number is at this location, right? There's definitely some cool things here for people using projects, especially I think if you're going on site to actually do installs, which is something we've seen a lot of people use projects for.
Yeah. And I don't know if they have geotagging like on creator apps. So if you have a mobile creator app and you take a picture, because I can see a lot of that. I don't know if it exists inside the CRM or not. I hope this is a feature they roll out because I can see just the example you gave. People might not use projects for that, right? But you might use a custom module inside the CRM for tracking those kind of things. So it'd be nice if they roll this out across the board. But overall, a pretty good feature. All right. So Tyler, so what do we have for the implementation of the week?
Yes, this week we have a custom integration between Zoho CRM and Zoho Sign. So though they do have a default integration that you can use to send out sign docs through the CRM, it takes a handful of clicks to get through it. And the first time that you do it for any document template, you actually have to manually line up all of the fields that you want to be pre-filled. And then kind of the last issue is that as you're pre-filling fields in this template, the field types you have to use are not editable by the person who's going to sign it. So it becomes a little bit restrictive where they can't actually edit the information in case anything was wrong in your CRM. So what we did is we basically created a custom button to create that Zoho Sign document. And, one of the slick things about it is that, it's basically one click and it can populate the document all just via whatever data you have in your CRM. It populates it in the fields that are still editable by the customer if we want to allow them to edit them. So that if, let's say, they have a little tweak to their address or they have an updated email or something like that, they can actually change it on the fly as they're signing. And then these documents can also be saved as a draft. If you do want to have a quick review of this doc, maybe you have a compliance team that wants to make sure that every document's perfect before it goes out. Or you could just dynamically send it out automatically just through the same workflow. But the cool thing about this is that you can take out the necessity of picking the template by building logic into the script. So for the example that we have here, we basically had a use case where a customer could buy, 1, 3, 5, 10 different products. And based on the number of products that are sold, a specific document needs to be created for signature. Basically, there are just different requirements for larger sales. And it's in an industry where compliance is very, very important and very, very strict. So there's really not a lot of wiggle room. So you might have an issue where, if you have sales reps working through and doing these, it's really easy to choose the wrong template. right? If you have 3 different versions of templates to create an inherently the same document with just minor little tweaks to it, easy to make mistakes there. So, what we can actually do with this is build in logic where it's looking at how many products are purchased, and based on that count, it's creating the template, or choosing the proper template to actually create and send out the document for signature. So it's pretty slick. I mean, we've not done a ton with Deluge into Zoho Sign so far, but I think that this could be something we do a little bit more often, because it's almost even faster than going through a mail merge process. And being able to build in that logic is pretty slick. Now, the one downside to this is that you're not really able to edit the language of the document before it goes out. So this is a good option for things that are, maybe a government form or something that you're never going to want to add any custom language to. You just need the fields to be filled. Where if you do want to be able to add in maybe some language around your scope or the nature of engagement, you might still want to use a mail merge. But this does create basically a one-click way to fill out almost any type of form, almost similar to what you could do with a form stack integration, just all living in the CRM.
That's super nice. Once you said they're editing, I read something in the forums the other day, which is interesting around Sign. So, if you're doing a mail merge, so you're using Zoho Writer, you've created it, then as soon as you're done editing it, you basically upload it to Zoho Sign. That's it. It's locked. You can't do anything with it. They're actually going to embed Writer in Sign. So you actually can make edits to the document. So if you're scrolling through ready to send and you see one little error, right? Mm-hmm. In the past, you'd have to cancel it, get out completely. You're now actually going to be able to edit that document on the fly before you send it out. It's great.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Great. Make life a heck of a lot easier. All right, so let's move on to this week's reads. This one is over at the Zoho blog. They are really starting to do some interesting things over here. This one, I mean, more and more I'm seeing better blogs coming from Zoho, and a lot of them are guest blogs that do some interesting things. This actually is a little different, and this is a video. It's a 40-minute interview that they had with a person who is an expert on email delivery. Basically, I'm going to say hopefully Sridhar Chandran, and he's basically with a company called Validity, and this is all he does is make sure that emails get delivered. The great thing about this is there is a chat transcript, and they define all the key terms, and it reads like an article. I mean, the guy is extremely well spoken, and basically if you kind of go through, he breaks it all down. It's not a short read, but I think one of the things, this is specifically focused on Gmail, but it applies to so many other things across the board here. But a really, really detailed read on email deliverability, and there's some good stuff here. Also on this, something I want to point out, I'm going to dig into this a little deeper. We'll post something, but the SPF records in Zoho to this point in time have been different. So on applications, so you end up having to put in all these different SPF records inside of your DNS server, and it looks like there's a workaround for that now, where you can just do one.zoho and it's going to do it all, or at the very worst, maybe just have to put in 3 that cover it all. But anyway, this is something we hear about a lot, and it's an issue with Zoho campaigns. It's an issue with any program where you're sending out mass mail, or you're sending it not directly from your email client. You need to make sure that all this is set up correctly. And anyway, nice job, and pretty good article, nice video. So if you're interested in that, I would suggest you take a look.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep on top of. It'll be interesting to see over time, where email marketing goes. I think especially as the US will probably eventually roll out some laws similar to GDPR about double opt-in, and some more controls around who can be mailed, if you can really just load in a purchase list and start blasting out to it. So it's kind of an interesting space to keep tabs on, because it's going to be changing a lot, I would bet, over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it's going to. And I think, on that token, it's funny, I've been on just a complete tear over the last 2 to 3 weeks to pretty much unsubscribe from anything and everything that is just cluttering my inbox. And I think it just doesn't work. I still get the emails still keep coming in.
Hmm.
And we've had this problem. I mean, that was one of the issues with Marketing Hub, right? Is that you could unsubscribe, but then it would actually run to the end of the term. And I think a lot of programs are written that way as well. I don't know what the issue is, but it seems that unsubscribe is not immediate, and that's something that we'll have to work on.
Yeah,
But
what
that's
you
a
got to
whole
do a
nother
lot of the
topic.
time is go into the edit preferences. So at the bottom of the email, you'll have unsubscribe, and then you'll have edit your preferences.
Right.
And what's done a lot of the times now is that you might be in 4 or 5 different lists, and when you unsubscribe, you're unsubscribing from one of those lists. Where if you go into your preference editor through the email link, that's actually where you can fully unsubscribe for everything. So it's kind of getting sneakier and sneakier over time on how to actually get off of a send list.
Yes, and what I love is the 5 clicks to totally unsubscribe. So yes, you got to do this. So you guys, are you sure you really want to go? Yes, or well, we're going to be really sad to see you go. Are you sure you don't want to stay? And it's like,
Yeah.
Makes you want to go more. And then I put in another read this week. We've not talked about this probably in 3 months, but HubSpot has been doing a series where they're taking the generic data across their entire user base, and they're saying, how has COVID impacted things? How about deals, number of deals won, marketing emails, website traffic, those kind of things. And they're really trying to look at, how bad is COVID and what's it doing? And this is kind of a 6-month in update that they've done. Pretty interesting. I mean, at the end of the line, deals are slowly starting to rise a little bit. I love this graph though. Marketing emails are through the roof, but if you're watching the video, the responses to those emails are lagging considerably.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at this overall increase starting in March, I mean, it's just through the roof. I mean, currently, companies are sending twice as many emails as they ever did in the past, yet the response to those emails looks to be down around 30% from when they were only sending the baseline emails. So It's been a steady decline. I think there's a little bit of email fatigue for companies. But it's a nice read. It's good to know that deals won, they're starting to see a slow increase in those. So it's good if you're kind of curious as to how businesses are doing and where we might be going. I think this is a pretty decent read.
Yeah, I think it is. It's interesting. I mean, even with those stats, if you're sending 100% more emails, but you're getting 25% less response rate, you're actually getting more bulk responses. So it'll be interesting. I wonder where the tipping point is, if where it's just too many emails going out, where you'd actually have a negative total number of responses, a negative effect on the total number. Because here we're seeing 100% more emails, 25, 30% less responses, but that's more total responses as you're sending out these emails. So it'll be interesting to see where this trends over time. And, if the heavy reliance on email marketing can kind of tip the scales a little bit.
All right. And that takes us to what's happening over on Zenatta.com. So some interesting stuff. We basically have got a Zenatta blog here that on Zoho Notebook, and using Zoho Notebook and everything you kind of want to do with it. So it's kind of a real deep dive into Zoho Notebook, and I think really worth taking a look at. And then we also have our new YouTube up on YouTube is basically our webinar. Our Zoho Books webinar is up. And I think it turned out exceptionally well, actually. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not, but what I particularly like, I don't know if you notice, is this new little spinning logo we added in that goes between Zenatta and CRM Zen. Yeah, it's kind of cool. But
it's fancy.
Anyway, yeah, it's a pretty good webinar. We covered a lot of ground and had some good questions. So if you're into Zoho Books, I would suggest you check that out. Then we found a few implementation guides. This one I particularly like. It's the CRM implementation guide for small and medium businesses. And it says, I don't know where we keep finding these things, but we're finding a lot of them. And this one's pretty good, actually. It's 51 pages on CRM implementation. So worth taking a look at. We found another one on Amazon Connect, which most people don't know, but Amazon Connect is a phone service. Amazon's into everything. It's an AWS service, and there is phone bridge integration. it's a little tricky. So there's kind of a 14-page document on everything you need to do to go ahead and set up the Amazon phone bridge stuff. So pretty good. I don't know how we keep finding them. I am here. It's getting harder and harder for us to find some of these, but it's what it is. All right. And then our application of the week, man, oh man. So, it gets harder every week. I'm looking around. I mean, honestly, we're at show 118. And I don't really find new applications every week, so I have to go digging. So I've started kind of going back on ones that weren't that great, that didn't make the show. And Zoho has a mobile application for both iOS and Android, and it's just called Card Scanner. They don't really brand Zoho on it anywhere. And it not only works with Zoho, but it also works with like Salesforce.com and all these others. But basically scans a business card and then adds it in to your application. You can add it in as a contact, add it as a lead. It works with books, invoice, contact manager. You can add it to Zoho Mail, and of course the CRM platform. It now even supports Biggin. Biggin, which is taking over the world, as we know, right? So it's pretty cool though. I tested it out on like 10 different business cards to see if it had improved, and it had 100% accuracy. And I threw some bad cards at it. So, and I've looked at the update, and they have done just a ton of stuff. And it now supports 17 languages. But I mean, this thing's getting updated twice a month. So great application.
Yeah, and one that I think used to be not too great, but that they've definitely put a ton of work into to make it pretty powerful. Would be nice to have a Zoho branded just a little bit, make it easier to find for people. I'm sure looking on the iOS store for Card Scanner, you're going to see a whole bunch of applications. So you might want to consider adding something to that so that we can know where to find it a little bit easier. But other than
the
that,
other really cool thing about this is more and more, I imagine one day, Tyler, trade shows will return. And I was noticing in 2019 a lot at trade shows that instead of having just a random barcode on a person's badge, they were having a QR code on the person's badge, which had all of the information. And this is also a QR code scanner. So if you scan this, you scan the QR code and instantly take that perfect data then, right, and write it back into the CRM or whatever app you choose. So it's a great app. Really glad I took another look at it, and I recommend everyone else do the same. All right, and that takes us to our application of the week. So
tips and tricks.
Our tips. I'm sorry. All right, and that takes us to our tips and tricks of the week. We had a question during the books webinar, which was, is it possible to send an invoice from the CRM? And I'm like, well, yes, it's possible to send an invoice from the CRM. He goes, how? Show us how. But we really don't do live demos or anything like that when we're doing the webinars. We kind of keep them crisp like that. So I promised that person that I would create a little video on how to do that. So 3 minutes and 45 seconds. It's funny. This is from the beginning though. So this is Zoho Books is not connected to Zoho CRM. So this is the complete thing. Connecting Zoho Books to Zoho CRM, getting the synchronization going, eliminating the CRM modules for purchase orders and quotes and invoices, getting it cleaned up, talking about where the entire finance suite now sits and the related list side, and then creating an invoice and showing it on both sides. I also created a second video that'll drop next week, which really talks about details, deep user permissions, because we didn't really go into those very deeply on the webinar. We glossed over them. So kind of how to set up those user permissions as well. So if whoever you were, I don't know your name, but this video is for you. And I think it's, this is something internally we use all the time as developers. Our consultants are talking to customers and they're like, well, I need 5 more hours to get this project done, or 3 more hours. And it's just a quick thing. I mean, they can do it themselves, right? Within the record, they can go ahead, spin up an invoice, send it out to the customer, and it's done. No access really to Zoho Books, no access to any of that, but that ability to go in, also then to go into a client that you're working with and see whether or not they've paid their invoice or not, and all of those kind of things. I mean, super important that that you can do that in many organizations. So we're taking a look at, and hopefully you found that useful.
Yeah, I think this is one of the kind of nicest parts about the Zoho books and CRM integration is just that full visibility. And then on top of that, to build on what you're saying, if you've got, let's say 10 deals historically with a specific account or with a specific contact, if you have these invoices underneath those deals, then they'll roll up and then be visible underneath the account, underneath the contact. So you kind of complete the loop and can see this information across really the entire CRM.
Yeah. All right, and that's a wrap. But before we go, I want to point out that we finally got the CRM Zen swag in. So we got the new T-shirts, CRM Zen AF, CRM Zen Show. We've got the new coffee mugs in. You can head over to CRM Zen and pick those up. I don't think we're going to sell any, Tyler, but at least all of us will get the stuff. We'll send it out there. A lot of that was just built. We're doing a lot of work with Shopify, and we felt it was important to have an internal store for our own stuff. And that's been going pretty well as well. So as always, we love doing the show for you guys. If you got any questions or comments, please hit us up over at info@zenatta.com or just head over to zenatta.com and click on drop us a line.
And on the website is where you'll find complete episodes as well as show notes with links to the stories we discussed today. You can always follow us on your favorite social media platform and subscribe to us on any podcast app as well as on YouTube. We'll see you next Monday.